welcome to Impact Physical Therapy's November 2020 blog. My name is Laura and I'm one of the physical therapists here. And I'm joined today by Emily Velasquez. She's a registered dietitian and she has worked with many athletes, including spending some time working at Nike. And she really is passionate about considering the nutritional needs of all athletes, particularly dancers as well. So we're excited to have you, Emily.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And so we're just going to do an informal interview conversation about different nutritional needs of athletes, and hopefully you can learn something about how to help meet your nutritional needs and whatever performance goals you have. So Emily, why should an active person pay attention to their nutrition?
That is a great question. So there are so many reasons for this. Number one is energy. So in order to have the energy to participate in activity, to have the mental stamina and concentration to do it at all, both of them come down to the energy that's available to best fuel you. Also, with activity comes the use of muscles. So anything to support the best kind of strength and the type of muscle that you're using as an active person. And then the other important factor is preventing both illness and injury, which are going to hold you back, hold anybody back from being able to go about their lives in an optimal way.
Definitely. What are some ways to help a person track their nutritional intake, whether it be calories or carbs, protein amounts?
Yeah, so that's a little bit of a tricky question because it really depends on the type of person. For most people, taking a look at each plate that they're consuming and looking at the types of foods that it's containing and making sure that you're getting lots of colors from your fruits and vegetables, that will go into the kind of protection component to make sure that you're not getting sick. And then combining both carbohydrates and proteins with every meal, that is usually sufficient for most active people. It gets a little bit more complicated with those who have more and more specific goals. Sometimes tracking with apps can be helpful, or writing it down, or maybe there's a certain nutrient that you're looking for in particular, in which case reading labels and that sort of thing might be the way to go. But a lot of times paying attention to the quality of what you're eating, that it's balanced, and then noticing first of all hunger levels and how you feel, but also paying attention to your energy needs and how you feel and how your workouts are going or activity.
Gotcha. And do you have any specific apps or programs that you find more athletes to gravitate towards? Or perhaps even better yet, what should someone do if they get stuck in the world of the internet where diets and trends are abounding? What can those people do if they just don't know where to start?
Yeah. So two resources are great. So first of all, one is to get your first step in your basic needs. ChooseMyPlate.gov, which is through the USDA, and it encapsulates the dietary guidelines, and it does hit it for most people. They also have this function where they can personalize, you're based on some information that you enter about yourself and how active you are. It does give you your calorie requirements, but it breaks that down into food groups, so you're not even thinking about macros as opposed to just the types of foods, and it helps you with portions. So I really like that component of it. And then in terms of fine-tuning those needs based on sport or based on different different components, a great one for athletes is called sportsrd.org. And sportsrd.org is this network of sports dietitians, and they put together a lot of infographics and fact sheets that provide a little bit more in-depth information about what to look for. In terms of apps and tracking, so MyFitnessPal is one of the ones with the best database because it's been around the most, and it's been around a long time. A lot of people use it. The thing about tracking is that for a lot of people, it can be a little bit too much because it can be like, it takes a lot of time to do every day.
Right, and then you get behind a few days, and
Right.
you've forgotten how much or what you did have
Right.
to eat, and
Right.
then now I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah, exactly. So that's when there's also like I want to say like Spark People, Fit Day. There's even one called My Plate that's not associated with Choose My Plate. They're all fine and adequate. It's just that it's the legitimacy of the database that's there, and so MyFitnessPal has a lot in there. The only thing that you want to be aware of on those is to see if it's like verified by the USDA, because there's this whole like it's done by nutrition scientists and analyzed as opposed to someone who was reading it, and they might be looking at it differently or not be reporting everything. And again, that's so when you know something that maybe you're noticing that you're just not eating enough, and so you're just making sure like, oh, you feel really full but your calorie intake is pretty low for what you need. That can kind of help you get there. But the thing about it is it's kind of like training wheels on a bike. To do it just a little bit, and it helps you internalize it. It's just a tool so that you can try to it helps influence your habits so that you can do it without it. It's not, I don't see it as something to be using full time.
So it's more like just developing the mindset and the awareness of
Mhm.
portion size, what ingredients are in my food,
Mhm.
what is this food meeting in terms of my nutritional needs, and as someone develops a rhythm for what their normal diet is, they can wean away from
Mhm.
the day-to-day tracking. That's really nice
Yeah.
for a lot of people.
And sometimes just reading a label by itself and writing it down just in and of itself can be helpful, to look at the ingredient list, to look at the carbohydrates or the protein or whatever it is, vitamins that they need. In and of itself, even without tracking it, can still be helpful.
Gotcha. That's really grateful, good information to know. So switching gears a little bit, thinking about athletes who are in training right now, maybe getting ready for winter sports or are in their off season, how can nutrition optimize some person's specific fitness goals? And we see here at Impact a lot of runners, cyclists, but we also see some people who are CrossFitters, who like to do strength training. Is there anything that nutrition can do for those athlete groups?
Yeah, so the first thing to think about is the type of energy output that you're using for that. And of course, if you aren't quite sure, working with your physical therapist or your trainer or your dietitian to understand what that is can be helpful. But basically, with those more endurance-based activities that are very cardiovascular, you're going to want to focus more on carbohydrates overall, and your amount of carbohydrates are going to play a little bit more of a role in how that optimizes your goal. When you get into a little more strength training type sports that are more anaerobic, that are more muscle based, that's when looking at the amount or the timing or the quality of the protein might play a little bit bigger of a role overall. And then so depending on what those are, and then no matter what, getting the right kind of amount overall is going to be helpful too, again, for both energy to do what you need to do, and then to prevent injury as well. So that's something that's kind of underemphasized a lot of time, because there's diet culture and there's this fear of having too many calories and getting the best results that you can with the fewest calories, basically. But the thing is that if you're not getting enough calories, there could be consequences that you're not even aware of. Like, you might be like, oh, I'm feeling okay, my workouts feel energized, I must be fine. But actually, your body could be compensating in other ways. So it could have to do with like your bone turnover, and you might not notice it till you're older. Or it could be in your mood, it could be in your concentration, and it could be just in other body functions that everybody's different. So just because you don't feel sluggish, which if you do feel sluggish, you're probably not getting enough.
Probably too late.
or you're not getting enough carbs, because that's a big thing. But it's just something to be aware of too, no matter what sport, whatever type of sport that you're in.
Sure, because as a physical therapist, one thing I always stress to my athletes is the importance of a rest day.
Mm-hmm.
A day where they're not in the gym or on the field practicing. Their body needs time to recover, and in that recovery is having the nutrition to build new bone, new muscle, new tendon, even in a healthy individual that isn't injured. So I think that's really important that you touch on nutrition, sleep, hydration, all matter when you are training for your race, your competitive event.
Right. It is just one piece. If you have the right nutrition, but you're missing those other pieces, then you're going to miss out on the big picture. And then the other thing you just mentioned that's important too is that with rest, like some people ask about if you don't need as much on a rest day because you're not doing as much. And the answer is you might need slightly less, but overall it's not something to worry about, that it should just still be about the same as your day-to-day because your body's still using it and in part of that rest and recovery piece.
Gotcha. So then thinking about athletes who have been injured, what would you say to them in terms of how they may need to consider modifying their nutrition?
Yeah. So first of all, of course, it's important to be mindful of the type of, like, how much they need, like, to follow hunger. They, if you're not moving around as much, you probably won't need as much food. You'll still need some for the healing process, but so that might come down a lot. If you're a runner and you're out and you're doing miles and miles every week, lots of hours, then you might need to bring back total amount of food, which your body will probably tell you that, and they'll notice a decrease in appetite. But the other thing is that there's certain nutrients that are important depending on the type of injury. So if you're looking at a bone injury, a fracture or whatever, so you have, of course, your calcium and vitamin D that is important to be getting enough of, which is primarily from dairy products, but can be well absorbed calcium can be well absorbed in certain fortified foods such as orange juice and tofu. And some greens are very, what's called bioavailable as well, our fancy word for saying your body can efficiently use it. And vitamin D is usually supplemented with it because they absorb well together. That's one, because of our latitude and the cloudiness here, it's tricky to get through the diet. It's tricky to get through the diet, it's tricky to get through the sun, so a lot of people do take supplements for that. And then if it's more of a ligament issue, tendon, whatever, then there's actually the role some more of, so you've heard of collagen, so there are collagen supplements. There is emerging research of how much that can support the healing process, but it's also in natural forms of foods. So if you're eating chicken wings, if you eat that little part that's chewy and kind of crunchy, it doesn't feel like meat. That's actually the collagen tissue of the animal if you eat meat, and you can get it that way too. And then there isn't, within that field, there's less research, but it does break down into glycine, not to get super complicated, but there's sesame seeds contain that as well to support ligament health. And then either one of those types of injuries too come down to protein as well, because any tissue in our body, no matter what it is, connective tissue, bone, skin, it all is going to come down to protein because that's our body's building blocks. So making sure that there is enough protein available.
And not just because you're injured, cutting back on calories and nutrients, leaving yourself in that starvation state, because in an injury your body needs to build new tissue. And if you're not providing it the adequate building blocks, things are going to be slower and less optimal in their healing process.
Exactly.
So that makes complete sense. And to consider consulting with a dietitian, a registered dietitian too, in states of injury or in performance optimization, to make sure you're dialed into where you need to be.
Yeah.
Great. Well, in our remaining time, if there's lots of myths surrounding nutrition, I'm sure you've heard the gamut and internally rolled your eyes a few times. Kind of one that I think, which we may have already talked about, is this need to avoid carbohydrates. They will lead to weight gain if you eat too many or any at all. Can you bust that myth for us a little
Definitely.
bit?
So carbohydrates are the body's preferred energy source. They are most easily digested and used for fuel. And while protein and fat are the other two components that they contain calories. They are burned, but they're much less efficient, particularly protein. And so we need them to be able to function. If we pull back on them, it's not doing our body a service in that. And so, the more energy you need, especially if there's high endurance or high anaerobic level, you'll need carbohydrates. Like, of course, we all wish we could just tell our bodies to use all our extra fat stores and then just have it work like that, but it doesn't, especially because of the ways our bodies have adapted over time.
Sure.
We need them in order to be active, and the more active you are, then the more you need them. So I talked about the plate, like you asked about looking at it. The more active you are, the more your plate should contain carbohydrates, whether it's from grains or whether it's from fruits, or it's in dairy, and occasionally, sweets are okay in moderation, and sometimes even, depending on your level of intensity, those sports products like blocks and chews, which are essentially highly formulated,
right,
but are basically gummies and chews with sugar in them.
Sure.
They're actually helpful because they're what the body needs to get to the energy and what they need. So it's just very,
Gotcha.
very important, needed.
I think another final myth or thing that sometimes I hear from clients is that creating a nutritional plan is hard, or that sticking to a nutritional plan is difficult. What would you say to those people who maybe are on the fence about should I start, or maybe aren't feeling totally yet motivated to get committed to a nutrition plan?
Right. So as with any kind of behavior change, life change, habit implementation, the trick is to start small and to start one meal at a time. Yes, meeting with a professional like myself can help, but you can look at just, the first step for you might be taking 5 minutes to do a survey of where you're at now, and noticing, you skip breakfast a lot, or you completely don't have any carbs at your lunch or something like that, and just noticing what's in the middle. Or it might be, being unaware of where your protein is, and just being I'm not having any protein throughout the day, I just have it twice a day and I need to spread it out more, which is important for muscle optimization. And so you're okay, so I'm not right now, so I'll just grab a cheese stick and I'll make sure I have that as an afternoon snack to get another little serving of protein in there. So there's lots of ways, and a lot of people have the ability to take the healthy tricks and tips that they know and just increase it, improve it, one food, one meal, one snack at a time. And then when it comes down to the needs for carbohydrates and protein especially, it is that mindful piece of just adding it in slowly, adding those types of foods into your different meals and snacks throughout the day.
That's great advice. Well, thank you for joining us. I hope
Yes.
you learned something. I know I did. If you have further questions for Emily or myself, we'll be sure to include her information at the bottom of our link. And have a good rest of your day.